It was 6:30 in the morning and I was capital S stuck. I'd breezed through every other puzzle in this area, but I was one step short of a solution here and it was driving me insane. It was only when I gave up and went to go brush my teeth that it clicked, sending me rushing back to my computer for more. The Talos Principle 2 is full of moments like this, making you feel like Tom Hanks creating fire every time you solve a challenging puzzle.
I have made fire!
But what stuck with me long after the puzzles was the philosophical story it tells. When the credits finally rolled, I found myself deeply moved, and I'll be thinking about both that ending and that breakthrough moment for a long time to come.
But we shouldn't forget that life began in the sea. We are the children of the sea.
The Talos Principle 2 picks up thousands of years after the events of the first game. Athena, the android at the end of the original Talos Principle, has created several other androids, and together they've built the city of New Jerusalem.
Thank you, and may the Founder be with you.
While Athena has since gone missing, the new humans of New Jerusalem have collectively worked to build exactly 1,000 new citizens, and you step into the shoes of 1K, the final one.
Look, it's 1K!
From there, you're thrust into the middle of an expedition to an intriguing island, complete with a colossal megastructure. The goal is simple: solve enough puzzles to activate 3 towers in the region you're in, which will then grant access to the megastructure.
And we're headed right into it.
Where you'll solve even more puzzles to unlock the next of the 4 total regions. There's no combat in the Talos Principle 2, and your actions are fairly limited. So the challenge comes from all the devious ways you'll need to manipulate objects in the world as you guide 1K to specific, puzzle-ending pedestals. That may sound simple, but it's anything but in practice. For instance, you may need to connect a laser to a receiver, but how do you do that when it's behind a force field door, or separated by a laser-blocking fence? Or perhaps the entire puzzle hinges on flipping a switch to turn on a fan, but doing so closes off another area you'll still need access to. Every puzzle in the Talos Principle 2 feels like you're just missing one more item in order to solve it, right up until you solve it without that, of course. These puzzles do the thing every puzzle game should do: make you feel incredibly dumb, then like the smartest person alive, then incredibly dumb again in the span of a few minutes. Some puzzles I breezed through. Some I struggled with, only to return and solve easily later. Some I never solved at all. But I always felt like I was just one moment of understanding away. And if you're stuck, wandering into a different puzzle will probably give you a clue as to what you need to do elsewhere. You'll rarely be in a position where you can't progress, even when you're stuck on multiple puzzles, because you usually have access to more than one island at a time. If you're really in a dire spot, you can even find sparks hidden around the islands that will clear a puzzle without solving it. But you don't get your spark back until you solve the puzzle you spent it on. That's a nice protection against getting completely locked out, but these sparks are hard to find. I only stumbled across 3 during my entire playthrough.
Yakut, take us in.
Aye, aye, sir.
Exploring between each puzzle is where the Talos Principle 2 really comes alive. You'll find optional monument puzzles that are by far the most complicated challenges around. I only managed to solve a few of them, but they still provide a nice break from the standard puzzles, and encourage you to get off the beaten path.
When good is weighed against evil, tip the scale.
The Talos Principle 2 is also steeped in real-world philosophy, and you can find it in the databanks scattered throughout the world if you look closely. You'll read thought-provoking excerpts from real-world philosophers and poets, interwoven nicely with in-universe audio logs and research notes.
He moved of his own volition. He spoke and could be spoken to, had wishes and desires.
That hold some of the clues to unraveling the megastructure and the puzzles surrounding it. The different areas are both huge and utterly gorgeous, so there's plenty to find and even more to explore, and all of it adds to the complex and compelling themes the Talos Principle 2 grapples with. What do we owe one another? What responsibility do we have for the planet and the animals that inhabit it? Do we have a duty to multiply and spread consciousness? Or should we be humble and seek balance? What does it mean to be human? The Talos Principle interrogates all of these questions honestly, and how you respond to them determines how both other characters see you and what happens in the story.
Civilization is always on the brink of collapse unless we do something about it.
Depending on how you interact with 1K's friends, you might even convince them to adopt your point of view. The characters are both well written and acted, and the changes they go through are both gradual and natural.
The world is full of remarkable sights, and experiencing them changes you.
Some elements of the story are, admittedly, predictable, but it was always compelling and surprising enough to keep me invested. If I have one major complaint, it actually has to do with the in-game puzzles. Largely, the puzzles in the Talos Principle 2 are excellent. For most of its runtime, it builds smartly on itself, introducing new ideas and items to keep puzzles interesting, and then iterating on them in surprising ways. The teleporter, which bends the rules by allowing you to instantly travel to any teleporter you can see, even while holding an item, breaks things wide open, allowing for some of the most creative and enjoyable puzzles available. Ditto for the drill, which lets you open holes through walls, portal style. So it's a shame that in-game puzzles in general, and the last island before your final venture inside the megastructure specifically, discard most of these new tools to focus on many of the older, simpler ones. On top of that, the jump in difficulty from the previous islands isn't so much a curve as it is a vertical line going straight up. I went from being able to solve 5 or 6 puzzles on my first try to barely managing to beat 1, and then grinding out 5 more through sheer determination. If I hadn't had 3 sparks, I may still be stuck on that final island, utterly perplexed. Which is even more odd because the puzzles in the finale just after it are both more creative and fun while being substantially easier. It's also worth mentioning that the Talos Principle 2 crashed on me pretty frequently. Mostly this wasn't a big deal as autosaves are generous, but the time it became an actual issue was during the endgame, which has one long gauntlet of puzzles that doesn't save between sections. I was only able to finish it through persistence and sheer luck, because one run just decided not to crash. But even that wet blanket couldn't put a damper on how much I loved the Talos Principle 2's ending, which I won't spoil here. I found at least 3 endings so far, but the first one I got still feels the most right to me. Aside from being beautiful, it was the ending I got because I believed certain things philosophically, and made choices that led to that outcome. It felt like something I built myself through the choices I made. Puzzles are meant to be solved, while philosophy deals with something that inherently can't be. That the Talos Principle manages to explore both simultaneously is incredibly impressive. There are issues with the difficulty curve in spots, but those complaints pale in comparison to everything the Talos Principle 2 does right. Its puzzles had me saying, I don't know, I really don't know, out loud one moment, and shouting, I am the smartest man alive, moments later. Its exploration of philosophy both challenged and supported my existing beliefs, and made me consider new ones, while managing to add a heck of a lot of books to my reading list. And perhaps most importantly, its thoughtful, heartfelt, and deeply moving story reaffirmed my faith in people and in what we can accomplish if we are determined, to quote Tennyson, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.
So I believe that people are a fundamental good. I don't believe we're all flawless, but I think every one of us matters precisely because nothing else does.
For more, be sure to check out our reviews of Quantum Error and RoboCop Rogue City. And for everything else, keep it here at IGN.